Is there a strategy that'll help you grow your company faster? CEO Sales Strategies is an investigative business podcast for entrepreneurial people who never stop asking questions. Highly acclaimed sales revenue growth expert Doug C. Brown interviews CEOs, business owners, and professionals who serve them to uncover and share actionable tips and methods behind their bulletproof sales strategies. Topics covered on the show include their failures, struggles, secrets, and processes that help them succeed in selling millions to billions of dollars of their products and services, all with the sole aim of helping you grow your business. If you are eager to know the most effective sales secrets from the A players of the game, then the CEO Sales Strategies podcast is certainly the place to be.
Hey everyone, this is Doug C. Brown with the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. I have a really great guest today. His name is Mr. Rylee Meek. You can find him at Rylee, R-Y-L-E-E, Meek, MEEK.com. And Rylee and I are speaking about doing one-to-many in sales. So selling one-to-many. So you can do one-on-one sales, which is cool. You know, it's people do this all the time. I'd still do this. But one-to-many, you leverage. So if you want to be in the top 1% of earners, this is a concept that you're going to want to master, because you can sell one-to-many B2B. You could sell one-to-many B2C. You can sell one-to-many B2E, be the entrepreneur, right? So business to entrepreneur. It's just a process. And it's really cool. Even if you do small groups, you sell into 15 people and you end up with, 10 conversations and 5 sales closes. It's a way to leverage the qualification process as well as the engagement process and speed up the time to sale. So we're going to go into this pretty deep, and he's an expert in doing this. So let's go talk to Rylee. Rylee, welcome to the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. Thanks so much for being here.
Hey, Doug. Happy to be here, man. This is going to be fun.
Now, I know you travel all over the place. You're in Dallas now. You were in Connecticut the last week, if I remember correctly. Yeah. And you're running something called social dynamic selling or social dynamic sales. And today we're going to talk about doing one-to-many sales and doing it more in a live format, like seminars, filling rooms. And why everybody, now that they've kind of been off the grid for a couple of years, are getting more hungry to get back to this, and how we can use this as a selling strategy, whether it's B2B or B2C. So let's talk about it. What's the advantage of doing one-to-many versus, one-to-one?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing that comes to mind for people, or at least for me, when I started or was first introduced to this concept, is this the power of leverage. And not just even our time, of course, that makes sense, but even from a marketing standpoint, I can push people to a specific time, place, and then ultimately I can deliver a presentation to an ideal client that is excited about hearing what we have to offer, of course. And then ultimately, if I take them on that emotional journey to get them to know me, like me, trust me, ultimately, then I can gain the ability to ask for that next appointment to then meet with them, potentially one-on-one, to ask for the sale, or at least provide a proposal for whatever your products or services are. So it's something that I came across, man, probably a little over a decade ago, and it blew my mind because everything that I had done prior to that was one-on-one. Right. And when it was almost like inventing fire right in front of me, when I was like, what in the world? I couldn't even believe it. And I think what really made me so upset, Doug, was that I wasn't the one that first thought about it, because I certainly didn't create this. Dinner seminars have been around for years and years. Financial advisors have been doing this for a long time. But I think one of the things that we've done over the last decade is really perfect this model from the overall continuity of the marketing standpoint, getting somebody to first off raise their hand on who you actually are, to the sale and the follow-up process after that.
So that's an interesting point. And if people don't think this works, this is how McDonald's built their corporation.
Yeah.
Right? So I like you, came across this a little earlier than you are, because I'm older than you are, but back when we could only use teleconference bridges, and then things were coming into video and teleconference bridges. You couldn't connect on unless you had a phone still. That's how old it is. And we used to put upwards to 20 people in a room.
Yeah.
And we would then do exactly what you said. We would either sell something right then and there, or we would drive them to a one-on-one call. And we were averaging 42.5% close rates off these rooms.
Wow.
And
Wow.
and it wasn't just a fluke. It wasn't 1 year. It was multiple years. I did this for 7 years straight. And this is, in our fourth month, we hit 42.5% and just stayed right around there. Sometimes we'd close 100% of the room. Sometimes we'd close, 30% of the room. Sometimes we closed 60% of the room, whatever. But these were sales that back then, that's like $12,500, for a couple hours together, right? And you imagine you get 10 people, $12,500, 125 grand you make in 2 hours, right? So the concept works great, and it's been pioneered. A lot of times people think this is more of a business to consumer strategy, but I also think it's a business to business strategy, because we were selling business to business offerings at that point, as well as, I've helped a lot of companies actually employ this. So, but I think what you said was really interesting. Like, you want your ideal client there.
Yep.
And this is where I think the first point of failure is for people when they try this. It's like, I'll just fill a room.
Right. Yes, it's not. I could say when we first started, that was just my thought. I'm like, well, it can't be that hard. I can just throw a postcard together, right? And I'm going to invite some random people out, and if I do a good enough job, they'll purchase. And thankfully, I was able to kind of fail my way through some of these steps, and understanding that it's while that the concept is simple, there are a lot of intricate steps in place to identify who your true client avatar is. Like, who is it that I'm actually looking to reach? Is it the business owner, the CEO, the executive, the maybe HR person, or is it direct to consumer? I'm speaking to the husband or the wife, or age range. And so we've really refined this approach in identifying, like, okay, who am I actually selling to? And then how do I reach them from a marketing standpoint? How do I speak the language that they want to hear, and get them to raise their hand to take action, to ultimately show up for the event? Because it's also one thing to get them to say, yeah, I'm interested in this, and it's another thing to get them to actually show up for the event. And then, how do I speak their language in the presentation? Because at the end of the day, most products out there, not always the case, but most products are a commodity, right? They can get a lot of the things that we have from anybody. The question is, why would they buy from you? And then that's where we come into play and really consult on the sales side, making sure that there's proper continuity from the marketing side to the sales side, to actually fulfill what it is that we're providing, or what service it is that we're looking to actually sell to the end user.
So my head is popping off with so many questions to ask. So I'm writing feverishly here as you're doing this. Everybody, we're speaking with Mr. Rylee Meek. He has a website, RyleeMeek.com. Check it out. Smart guy. I love the first time we talked. I was like, bam, this is because, as we teach 1% earners, right? I mean, that's what we teach people, how to be 1% earners. It's easier and faster to do this in a group format than it is to do this one-on-one. Right. Even if you're selling really super high-end stuff. Like, I used to do these things in the telecommunications business where we would go and be invited to even a chamber of commerce or something like that, right? So they would fill the room with businesses. Now, were they our ideal client? Many were, but they all use phone service and they use data. So we could at least, and then what we would do is we'd go provide like an education-based presentation. And then we would drive them from education-based presentation to a sit down one-on-one or a phone call. And you could walk out of the room with 10 or 12 appointments. Right. And Rylee, people used to be like, what is this guy Doug doing? Like, because I was out selling, I had 9 people on my team. I was out selling all 9 together on the team. Right. And they were like, what is he doing? And I was doing that in the power of using referral-based stuff. But but it's really about getting your expertise out in front of people in the mass and positioning yourself as an expert. And then people generally will gravitate to that if they're the ideal client profile. And I agree with you. I see that as a mistake with people. And I've done that in the beginning too. I'd just be like, oh my God, there's 150 people in this room I can talk to. And it's like,
Right.
yeah, 3 actually are interested in what I have to say. The other came for the free meal,
Yeah.
or whatever, right? So,
But
and
even on that, Doug, I think one thing I like to even hit on that, part of the reason we call our company the social dynamic selling system is that there's a social dynamic that takes place in any setting, even with us right now, like across a Zoom channel, right? But if you think about going out to a restaurant, there's a social dynamic that's taking place. There's you and maybe your date that you're on. There's the server, the bartender, the other patrons. There's a dynamic that's taking place. And so what we do and what we teach on is like, how do I use that to my advantage? Because you could use it to your advantage or your disadvantage. And we've understood this process of, how people actually make decisions to, or get to the point to actually make a decision. So you want to create an environment where people don't necessarily feel like they're being sold, because nobody likes to be sold, but everybody likes to buy. And so if you can create that environment, and you said if there's only 3 people in the room that are going to purchase, amazing, no problem. I'm going to figure out how I can get the other 30 people in the room to know me and like me and trust me enough where they're creating a dynamic that it seems like everybody's doing this. So the best decision for anybody to make in that room is to say yes, right, or to ultimately make that appointment with me. And so I think it's important to not, because a lot of people think, well, can I only talk to the 3 people? And they want to narrow this down and niche
right.
this thing down so tight where there's not a dynamic that takes place with 3 people, or at least not to the extent of 30 people in a room, where we can use that whole dynamic of that group atmosphere to work in our advantage.
Yeah, that's another mistake I see people making doing this, right? They try to niche so close into what it is. And it's like, throw a wider net. Just,
Yep.
you'll grab some fish that you're going to throw back. That's okay.
Yes.
But you're also going to find some new fish flavors that you never even thought was like, oh my gosh, I can do that, or we can work that, or these other fish know other fish who need what you do. And so that is also a mistake I see. And I know you're right in the fact that people want to buy, they don't want to be sold to. A lot of times people will come to these type of offerings or these events because they want to see who else is in the room and they want to know if they can network with them.
You bet.
And I know I've done that. I'm like, somebody invites me to something, I'm like, I'll go. Let me see what I can, pull out of the room, right? Or that type of thing, and see if I have any clients, especially if I know the ideal client is in the room.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to tell to everybody who's listening to this, don't discount down the power of the network, because that network, and Rylee, maybe this has happened to you. It certainly happened to me. I've had people in the audience who come up to me afterwards, or, virtually or whatever, get a hold of me, and they go, I didn't buy what you were offering, but I have this relationship here that I want to introduce to you. And I'm involved in this relationship, and it's led to bigger things than I've ever thought it could lead to.
Yeah.
Software development, all kinds of stuff that's come out of this.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And I think the thing with that, Doug, is starting with the end in mind. So if we're going to look to create a campaign for somebody or a series of events, we always want to start with, okay, what is the ultimate goal at this event? What am I trying to sell? Or what am I looking to accomplish here? Is it just to get the appointment? Am I swiping the credit card? And then we can kind of back into this. And the biggest mistake that we see, a lot of very intellectual people, for instance, we work with a number of doctors on the medical side of things, and they do a phenomenal job at teaching, and to the point where we've gone to events where they literally get a round of applause. Everybody is like, that was the greatest presentation I've ever heard. And I asked how many appointments they got, and said, well, none. It's like, okay, well, do you consider that successful then? Are you happy with that? You educated a bunch of people with no clear call to action on what they're supposed to do. So I think if we know that going into anything, then we can start to put the toll gates or the benchmarks in place that we need to hit in order for that the end user to ultimately make that or take action on whatever it is that your offer is.
That's an extremely important point, because with people who don't understand. They may just go in, just as you said, they'll educate because they're an expert, right? They're a doctor,
Right.
right? They've studied a lot, they've seen a lot. But there always has to be a sales component to the process, so, and there also has to be kind of I would say, an entertaining type of process to these things as well. So it's kind of like educator meets infotainer meets sales, purpose, right? That to me has been the most successful thing that I've ever used or seen. And it sounds like you're teaching that model to people.
Absolutely.
And it's so needed. It's so needed because most, like, all right, if people are going to yell at me, Rylee, on this, I can tell, because I've been around that training industry for, 25 years, right? And I've played very, very high levels, and I've seen a lot of good, and I've seen a lot of, oh my gosh. But I see a lot of people teaching when they're teaching what you're trying to teach, they don't do it right. They just, it's like, push them out on stage. It's kind of
right.
Kind of like, push you out on stage and survive or die, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Now, stage could be virtual stage as well. And so when somebody doesn't have success right out of the gate, they don't know any better, right? And they're thinking, oh, this doesn't work. This doesn't work. But when they have the right formula, which is what you just said it was, then it works. Even if it works at a small degree in the beginning and you get better with your skills as you go along, you learn what to do, what to do. Somebody's sitting here going, okay, Rylee, you got me. I've always wanted to do this. How do they start? Like, what do they do?
Yeah, great question, because this is what I've done for the last almost 12 years now. It's crazy. I started my very first company doing dinner seminars in July of 2011, it actually would have been. And I had $673 in my bank account. So I want to completely take out the fact that, well, I don't have the money to start this thing. Now, does it take some money to really get this thing going? Yes, absolutely. But I did it with $673 in my bank account. So I want to make that clear. But the cool thing is that I turned that $673 into $2.1 million in 6 months. So from July of 2011 to the end of that year, I was able to do that. And we were selling, on average about a $3,200 ticket. And so we would want to figure out, obviously, we want to make sure that your ticket price is going to be something that's going to be sustainable. Because our tagline with this is really, we want to create a predictable, sustainable, and ultimately a scalable revenue model.
Right.
For people that are like, I'm just going to try this, I would tell them, don't waste your time, right? But if you're gonna commit to training to do this and actually see this through, then there's not a better system that I've ever seen. And I've done a lot of systems, and every time I've tried to do other things, I've come back to just this system is what works. And so that's why I went from having my own company selling products to now ultimately just consulting, because I realized that I didn't really care about any of the products or services that I was selling. It was just more a matter of, okay, the system works. Can I help somebody that already has a great product or a great service to have that continual flow of leads and sales into their business? Because at the end of the day, unless you have a flow of leads and sales, I would argue that you don't have a business. A lot of people have great hobbies, right? But if you build it, they do not come. I don't care what that movie has ever told us. It's like, how do we get a consistent flow? And that's ultimately what this does for us. And so the very first thing that I did is I saw somebody do this, and I was like, okay, I think I can figure this out. And I just started to spend money, literally spend money, not necessarily invest. But I failed my way through this and came up with really this system, as you had mentioned, and finding. So I've written a book that I'll make available here for the rest of all of your listeners here. It's called Food for Thought. And it is just how to use dinner seminar marketing to grow your business in ways you never thought possible. And it starts with, I literally walk people through this whole process. And I've had people that have just read this book, and 6 months later, I get an email that their first event, they did $63,000 in sales. And so I do want to just preface this with, you can read this book and you can absolutely apply every single thing that we do and we teach, we even consult on yourself. You don't have to hire us or if you don't want to, but you certainly, if you need that extra love or that touch, or you're like, I don't have the time, but I got money, then obviously that's where we would come into play and be able to help consult people through this process.
It makes good. The book's called Food for Thought.
Food for Thought, yes. And if people would like it, I can just if they want to text the word food, how about we'll just use that FOOD just to keep it simple, to 727-472-3860, and I'll get them a copy of that sent out to them.
So that's 727-472-3860.
You got it.
Cool. And type the word food, FOOD.
Yes.
You know, you said something, I think there's so much here that I'm writing note after note after note. You said something, can I do it? Right? Like people, because I think a lot of times people think, oh my gosh, can I do something like this? Like, I don't know how to present. I don't know how to do that. And it's a skill, folks. It's a skill, right? Yeah. It's a skill that you can learn. I wasn't the greatest presenter in the first day I ever got out there, right? I had an entertainment background. I was a musician. I was a DJ. So I was familiar with being out in front of people, but it's different when you're going through a process like this.
Yeah.
And I remember I heard Rod Stewart. He's like old singer, probably still singing. I mean, he's out there. I don't know how old you are, but you're up there now. And he said in the interview, one day he was watching a band, like he was watching like The Who, and he was watching a bunch of old bands. And then he went to a club and he was watching a band. He goes, I don't know how, but I think I can do this. Right. And now he's Rod Stewart. Right. So, if you talk to Tony Robbins, which I have, he didn't start day one being Tony Robbins the way he was. Right. Oprah Winfrey admittedly admits, she wasn't, she had to learn how to be a broadcaster. She had to learn how to do this. So how long does it take, Rylee, because people don't like to be like, that didn't work out. Right. So like, how long does it take to just start seeing some success? Like you said, somebody read the book, 6 months later, they pulled down $60,000 plus, right?
Yeah.
How long does it usually take somebody, like they work with your company, and to go from like first to second step, which is like starting to see some growth and results?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. And to tack on to what you had said, Doug, this is a learned skill set. My speech class teacher in high school, Mr. Fonder, if he would see me now, he would be, I barely passed this class. I was the kid in front with post-it notes. I was shaking, trembling, like no other. I hated standing up and speaking in front of people. And so this is something that was terrifying for me. But I did spend the time learning these skills. And at the end of the day, if there's any skill that we should all learn and really just become students of, it is how to communicate effectively. And if you want a better relationship, a better marriage, if you can master these communication skills, because that's really what sales is how do I communicate effectively? And for people that think, well, I'm just not in sales, or sales isn't for me, you're lying to yourself, because we are all in sales. If you understand what sales actually is, the root word of it, I don't know if you know this, but it's a Norwegian root word, which means selje. It's pronounced selje, which means to serve. And so if you have that mindset, like I'm here to serve, it kind of takes away that thought or that scariness of like, or maybe preconceived ideas that we have of what sales actually is. Because at the end of the day, you're there to serve. You're to provide hopefully a great, morally and ethical, great product. And then we can take them through this sales system that we actually create. But what I would suggest anybody does is hop on the phone with myself or somebody from our team and do just a quick little strategy call. We make it completely free to just determine, like, what is it that you're selling? What are you really selling? And are the price points, do they make sense? Because the last thing that I want to do is suggest you invest money into something that just might not have the proper ROI. Right. Because the goal with any of this is that, I like systems, I like processes where I know if I'm going to put 3 quarters in at any slot machine, I'm going to get $1 back. And if I know that that's going to happen, I'm never going to not put quarters in that slot machine, right? It's right. It's a continual cash register that I can continually put money in because I know I'm getting that return. And so I would suggest they hop on a call with somebody from our team just to determine if it makes sense. Because if you're selling a $38 real estate course and you have no additional lifetime value to your product, this isn't the system for you, right? I'll be the first to tell you that. But for the most part, if you've got we have a lifetime value of at least a couple grand with whatever it is you're selling, and that's going to be something that we can help out with as well. It's adjusting pricing models and things like that to make this fit. We can talk about that as well, but we want to make sure you get set up for success before you start to invest any sort of money in this type of system.
And in anything, if you're selling $32, $38 items, you got to sell a lot of it, right?
Do something else.
And yeah, you may want to just try to automate this more online, right?
Yes,
it's
absolutely.
one of those things, because when you look at the cost return of investment of time, if you had employees, you've got to sell a lot of stuff to, now I can hear SaaS companies yelling at me right now. Well, we do this, right? You're not selling a $38. You're selling $38 a month, and usually 2-year agreements, right? So it's starting to make more sense. Now, I do want to say something, because I know people here are listening to this and they're going, this makes sense, because how can it not, right? It really does. And, if you want to be a 1% earner, you really want to learn how to sell it in one-to-many. I mean, it really comes down to, you can sell very high-end stuff, but the cool part is you can sell high-end stuff to one-to-many too. So Rylee, I actually was able to, I don't know if I ever told you this, I actually closed a $435,000 deal virtually.
Nice.
From a group.
Wow.
And it was I was like, you got to be kidding me, right? It's like, because I didn't know what I was doing. Honestly, I really didn't. Not at that point. I just kind of was just doing what you said, effective communication, serving, right? And that's the key in this whole thing. You don't have to be the most polished person in the world. I know you can't make people snore while, they're listening to you. But the reality is you just have to be better than just a little bit better than they are, right? And give them a little more information. And I'm not saying better in the contextual side of I'm better than they are. What I'm saying is they're coming for a purpose, to hear something, education-wise, expertise-wise. If you just are a little bit more knowledgeable than they are, or you say something that makes them go, didn't know that, didn't know this, wow, that could work, then a lot of times they start gravitating toward us anyways. And here's another thing that I'll throw into the mix, which I'd love your feedback on, because you had shaking cards, and I remember I was 6th grade, and I remember my knees were like knocking and things like that. Yeah. But a lot of people think that I'm going to get up there and I'm shaking, that's going to be not successful. But what I have found is it's actually the opposite. The more genuine one is, and the more we are ourselves, the more people can relate to that person. And the reality is, the people who are usually listening, they don't have the confidence level to get up there and do what you're doing. So that actually elevates your expertise in the trust factor in a big way, because they can see even if you're struggling a little bit. What's your take on that?
Absolutely. You hit that on the head, because certainly there are times where you want to be polished, but most of the time people want to do business with those that they really trust, right? And people, we say people do business with those that they know, they like, and they trust, but also that like portion is those that are like them, as you mentioned. And so it is so important to, there's ways that we can speak to the subconscious and ultimately get them to position the presenter or whoever is on stage, we'll call it, to come across as that authoritative figure, but still then meet people where they're at, and ultimately, take them on an emotional journey. Because at the end of the day, every decision is an emotional decision. No matter how logical somebody thinks they are, they're going to make a buying decision based upon the feeling that it gives them. And so if we can take people on that emotional journey, ultimately to make that wise decision to say yes, or to schedule that follow-up with you, that one-on-one consultation, that's again the ultimate goal of this. And back to just doing this, here's the main thing I tell all of our new sales reps or new people that we're training in is that the audience doesn't know what you're supposed to say or not supposed to say, right? So for them, this is their first presentation, right? You may know, like, I've got my notes so detailed in my head. They don't know if you've missed something or you skipped a step or put it out of order. Take all of that out of the equation and just go up there and be you, be a genuine, likable person. And at the end of the day, you're going to gain their trust through that process.
Yeah. And stuff's going to happen. So you just keep swimming and you just keep going with it. I remember when I was in the DJ business, I did this wedding and we used to do this coordinated event around the bride and groom when we did weddings, and we would get the whole place up on the dance floor with the bride and groom. And we would do this stuff and they wouldn't even know what we were doing. I never even told the bride and grooms. And I'm like, yeah, the bride and groom's going to take you on a trip with them, you know, and they're going to pay for the whole thing out of pocket. And they're looking at me like, what are you doing? Right. And then the cue was, the bride and groom right now, you know, Joe and Mary are going to take you on a trip with them all the way to New York City. And then you would hear dun, 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 like the music was coordinated, right? And I did that all the way to New York City, and I heard Funky Town.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, so the person at the assistant booth played the wrong song. So I'm like, but first we're going to Funky Town, right? And you just keep going. You just keep swimming, let your personality fly out. Nobody knew anything different. And then the assistant was like, oh my God. And then put, you know, the right tune on, right? And I'm like, that was a short visit. Let's go to, right. And you just keep going. And what happens is people, they respond to you. I've had friends literally on stage. I don't know if you've ever heard these type of things, Rylee. We could probably talk battle stories. My friend was walking along the stage and his belt undid and his pants were not buttoned. And it literally, his pants fell to the floor.
I love it.
Right. And what he said was brilliant, right? Because he goes, pulls his pants up and he goes, okay, now you know all of me.
Yeah.
Let's talk about you, right? And he just kept going. And man, you know, that's what I find, that people, they have this inward feeling like, oh, people are going to judge us. And the reality is people judge us every single day. You know, I don't have hair. People judge me for it, right? Some judge me like, who's this crazy guy? Some people go, wow, that's pretty bold. You know, my wife likes it. That's all I care about. Right.
Right.
And I think you said, and we're speaking with Mr. Rylee Meek. Rylee has a social dynamic sales company, teaches people how to do one-to-many sales. All of you who are interested in becoming a 1% earner, you got to embrace this. Is something that we would teach you as well. Not as deep as Rylee teaches for sure, because he specializes in it, but the conceptual concept of it. And you said something, I would love to go a little deeper into this, Rylee. I know we're kind of running close to our time, but everyone's in sales, everyone. And I always say children are the best salesperson in the world. There's no filter, right? They ask questions. Why is this? How come this works? What about this? Huh? I didn't think it would work that way. What do you think about this way? Right? Children just do this naturally. And I got to tell you, my wife is one of the best salespeople in the world, because she sells me every single day on stuff. And I know she's doing it, right? But she uses feminine energy to actually get me to do whatever the hell she wants, really, when it comes down to it, right? And I'm happy to do it, right? Because it's effective communication. It's a win-win play. So I teach people, play win-win. You win, they win. If they don't win, you walk away. It's that simple. There are no bad clients. There are bad decisions that we make on the front end that say, we're going to take this on. We're going to do that construction job when we know we really shouldn't, right? Whatever it is. Then it turns into a nightmare. And I hear too many people blaming the client. That client's terrible. No, you made the mistake on the front end. That's how I feel. And so let's go to everybody's cells. And how do you break that down so people understand, like, they're selling every day. They go on a job interview. They're selling. You're behind the counter and you're serving coffee. You're selling. I mean, it's not like you have to have this, you know, Sandler sales program that, you know what I mean, or whatever sales program. and Sandler, you can send me a check for plugging your program. Thank you. But what would you say to people like, I'm not a salesperson. I don't know. Right.
Yep, absolutely. I think you hit it on the head there. It is, we're all in sales to an extent, right? Whether you're an pizza boy delivery guy, like you had to sell your boss on why you were the best person for that position,
right?
Or an IT guy, you're still in sales. If any of you are in any sort of relationship, if you're married, you're in sales, right? It's like, and you should be continually in sales. I'm selling my wife every day on why she shouldn't leave me, right? It's just like understanding of what that is. But I think everything that we do comes down to mindset, and why do we, maybe these preconceived ideas or notions of what sales is. And so if we can break down any of those barriers or limiting beliefs on I'm not a salesperson, or I that's just not for me. If we can start there, then we can start to actually tackle like what that actually means for their particular role. And so if we can break that understanding down, like we said before, it literally means to serve. If you're selling something that's not good, right, then that's probably you don't feel confident in it. If you're not convicted with what you're selling, then find something else, right? There's a million things that you could sell out there. And here's probably a preconceived idea that a lot of people have too, is that a lot of people will say you've got to be very passionate about what you're selling. And I actually disagree wholeheartedly with that, primarily because I've sold everything from siding and windows to bathtubs to solar to business valuation, stem cell, all over the place.
What? You were not passionate about siding?
Right? Exactly. What I was, I mean, obviously, again, it had to be a good product, a good service. I had to feel confident in what we were providing, and ultimately helping that person make the best decision for themselves. And being confident, knowing going into any situation that, hey, this product might not be for everybody, and being okay with that. But what our job is to do as salespeople is to help people make the best decision for themselves. So even with my spouse, it's like, I want to help make the best decision, not in a manipulative way that I'm going to coerce her to do something that she's going to regret, or I'm going to regret, right? But it's just, how do we break down those ideas of decision making? Because, man, I think the average person makes upwards of like 35,000 decisions on a daily basis. So it's a big task, especially by the end of the day, when you come time to like making those big important decisions. We literally get emotional decision fatigue. And this is why, when my wife messages me at 5 o'clock and like, what do you want to do for dinner? And it's like, I don't know. Like, right. And anybody that's got in a relationship, you've done this, and probably hits a little close to home. It's like,
I just did it. I literally just did it. I was asked that question. I'm like, you decide, right?
And I think that's such a powerful thing just for us to take away from this too. It's like, if you can pre-decide the little things in advance, I know this isn't necessarily a sales technique, but just from us personally, how we can better get through the day. If you can pre-decide those little things, like what's for dinner, who's picking up the kids, or, just the small things that give us the energy to make the big decisions throughout the day as we're running our business. Plus, then we still have the emotional energy to pour into our family and our spouse at the end of the day. But understanding, put yourself in your customer's situation and understand that we want to help them make that decision, not manipulate them or coerce them, but just, I'm going to help them make what's the best decision for you. So if you're in sales, just know, like, just get really good at helping people make decisions. And ultimately, if it's no, at least you found out quicker, so you're not wasting your time and you can move on to the next one.
Right. Somebody always has a problem or an opportunity they either want to solve or capitalize on. Absolutely. And in selling, if you can just help them do that, and that's your intention, you're always going to win. Because if you don't sell, and by the way, all of you people who think you're going to close 100% of every opportunity, and it's not going to happen. You might occasionally do it for a period of time, but just the law of averages is against us. And it's just a standard law in life, right? So absolutely. Just like if you go out and ask 1,000 girls out to a date, in my case, a percentage will say yes, and percentage will say no. And, batting averages, we all heard the old Hank Aaron or, Babe Ruth or whatever, they struck out more times than they actually hit home runs, but they're Babe Ruth and Hank Aaron, right? So
yeah.
I could talk to you all day, and I know you got other things to do, and I'm really grateful you're here. And I agree, selling oneself is probably the hardest sale sometimes. So how do people, I can imagine they're going, smart guy, Rylee Meek, I want to talk to you. I want to at least explore this. How do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, well, you had mentioned it earlier. So RyleeMeek.com, they can find out about all of our different consulting and coaching programs, things like that. And as I mentioned before, if they just text that word food to 727-472-3860, we can get them a copy of the dinner seminar book. And then also with that, we can send a link to actually schedule a consultation. Just will determine, hey, maybe give you some ideas if this is a good model or not. If it's not, we'll be the first to tell you that. And if it is, then we can give you some next steps on what we would suggest.
Awesome. Rylee, I really appreciate you being here and bringing the game. I really do. And I know everybody listening to this has also learned a lot. And check them out at RyleeMeek.com. And Rylee, I'd love to have you back on another episode down the line, and appreciate you being here.
Let's do it. Sounds great. Thanks, Doug. Appreciate it, man.
Okay. There's so much I took out of this. I have experience in doing this, but I still took a ton out of this. And I want to reiterate what we talked about. You do not need a whole host of skill sets in order to pull this off. It is a learned skill. And a lot of times I see people holding themselves back because, they feel a little less confident, maybe about getting up in front of people or being on video or, just like I am on right now. And I can tell you story after story of very, very well-known people, famous people, who, when they first started doing that, they weren't so confident, right? It's skill. It's a skill set that can be learned. And once you have a process and a skill set, and it's duplicatable, and you have something that's successful, and you just duplicate it over and over and over again. And that's where you shine. So you heard Rylee say, he went from, I believe, $673 to 2.1 million, all in the first 6 months of his business. It's a skill set. It's a learned process that's going on. And sometimes the hardest sale we make is selling ourselves that we can actually do this, and we would actually be committed to doing it. And so if that's you, get some introspection, I would say. Are you willing to put yourself out there? Are you willing to take it to the next level? Because if you really want to exponentially grow your sales and your sales revenue, this is one great way of doing it. It's called leverage. And in leverage, you got the same amount of time going into a single prospect, or the same amount of time going into a group of people. You'll leverage your time much more effectively. You'll make more money. You'll have more time to do other things. So if you love this subject matter and you have a subject matter that you think, hey, I'd be an expert at, or I want to hear something of an expert to talk about this specific subject matter that means something to you, reach out to us at YouMatter, YOUMATTER, at ceosalesstrategies.com. And if you feel that you want to be, or you want somebody in your organization, or you have somebody that wants to be in the top 1% of sellers making at least $500,000 a year or more net selling, reach out to me. Or if you're a company that's looking for those elite producers, those people that are highly trained, that they can just walk into your company, you can train them on their product or service. Reach out to me as well at doug@ceosalesstrategies.com, and let me know what you're thinking. We will respond to all inquiries, whether it fits or not, and we will let you know. If you like this podcast, in fact, if you love this podcast, I would ask you to please rate this podcast. Give it a 5-star rating. I know it takes a few minutes to do that, and quite frankly, it's a little bit of a pain, but I would really be grateful and appreciate that. If you have friends or people that that could just be helped by listening to this podcast, please reach out to them and extend an invitation to listen to the podcast. I would be forever grateful. And as always, go sell something today. Sell a lot of it. Sell it profitably. As Rylee and I were talking, play win-win. They win, you win. You'll make yourself happy. You'll make people happy. The world's a better place. This is Doug C. Brown with the CEO Sales Strategies Podcast, signing off. Until next time, to your success.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the CEO Sales Strategies Podcast. What is something that you learned that you could act on today? Don't forget to schedule it now, or it may never get forward momentum. If you find our content valuable, please leave a favorable review and let us know what you liked. Please also share this with others if the content will help them. For our show notes, other episodes, and more interesting content and resources, please visit ceosalesstrategiespodcast.com. See you soon, and to your continued success,